You are listening to the Dare to Love podcast with your hosts, Sonica Tinker and Christian Peterson, founders of LoveWorks. Hi, and welcome to the Dare to Love podcast. This is Christian talking. Today I am going to be talking about dating with specific emphasis on online dating. And I'll start with telling you a little story. I ran into a friend of mine last year. This friend of mine is a great looking guy. He's a kind human being. He's in his 40s. He's got a great job, makes good money. He's doing personal growth. He's like the most eligible bachelor I've ever met. And I was asking him about his experience in relationship, and he said, I'm doing online dating, and it's like a full-time job. And I thought, that actually really matches the experience of the single people, men and women, that Sonica and I coach. And we interact, through our business and our coaching and our workshops. We interact with a lot of single people, many different ages and social groups and whatnot. And many of them are reporting, a frustration that matches what my friend said, who said, with a very big sigh, it's like a full-time job. So today on the Dare to Love podcast, I'm going to be talking about dating and specifically online dating. And we'll talk about some of the cool things and benefits about online dating. And we'll be talking about some of the frustrations and challenges and pitfalls that exist. And I'll be giving you some ideas for how you can deal with it better and how you can make your dating experience more fun and satisfying and, frankly, less frustrating. So I'll start by sharing some fun statistics that I found. You can find two. This is actually from eHarmony, the dating service eHarmony's website. They have online dating statistics, that some of which are pretty interesting. And of course, these are statistics. They're put out by a private company, so you take it with however much salt you need to take it with. I'm not vouching for the validity of this, and it's readily available. And by the way, eHarmony is not the only service that publishes statistics. It's easy to find online dating statistics. You can go to Pew Research. They have some interesting stuff about it. But I'll just share these because some of them are interesting and good starting point for our conversation. There are a lot of single people in America. I mean, this is true in the entire Western world, but I'll speak from the American point of view here. In 2015, 50% of the entire U.S. population consisted of single adults, the highest number ever. There has never been this many single adults who are looking for relationships, which means the pool of eligible people is enormous in the U.S. I mean, like I said, it's true in other Western countries as well, but in the U.S. it's definitely true. And I'll take a sidestep and say, one of the things we often hear that single people will tell me in coaching with them is some version of, there just aren't any good men in my city, or there just aren't any women that match what I want. And, I'll just tell you bluntly right up front that is never accurate. Why you're not hooking up or finding or having relationships with people you like or have a good match with, it is not because there is a lack of good people out there. It is not because there is a lack of people in your area. I can't tell you how many times I've had the experience of someone initially saying there just aren't any good people. And after we do some work about how they look at themselves, think about themselves, how open or not they really are, and how they present themselves and go relate with people, I can't tell you how many times it's happened that they've met someone who lives in their backyard after doing some work. And just by sheer statistics, there are tens of millions of single adults who are also, like you might be, looking for relationship. 40% of Americans use online dating, which is tens and tens of millions of people. Age, it says here, one of their statistics, can impact finding a match. They actually say on eHarmony that for women, online dating statistics show that a woman's desirability online peaks at age 21. But at 26, women have more online pursuers than men, whereas at age 48, men have twice as many online pursuers as women. And this already points to one of the pitfalls and challenges about it is when you read stuff like this, is like, it's easy for you out there to think, well, if I'm not in my 20s, I don't look like I'm in my 20s. What's there for me? I had a lady call me the other day, who's not a client yet, but she was sharing some of her frustrations with me, and she said, well, I'm 55, and my only, my assets are my hair and my eyes and my skin. That's what is good on me. And I started a conversation with her about, well, if you really think that, then you are in for some serious disappointment. Which brings us to the next one that they say, and I'm going to be talking more about that on this podcast. The next piece of statistics they offer here is they say 53% of people lie on their online dating profile. And what they lie about is age, height, weight, and job income. It said that they claim on eHarmony's site here that 20% of women who were surveyed by a global research agency admitted to using photos from when they were younger and thinner. And more than 40% of men say they lied about their jobs in an effort to sound more successful. Again, this speaks to how much we in online dating are trying to sell ourselves as if we were a product that we were trying to make look really appealing. All right. 20% of current committed relationships began online. And they claim that in 2015, 7% of marriages in 2015 were between couples that met on a dating website. And this is another important piece that I'll be talking about more, is to say that online dating is not everything. It gets a lot of attention, and rightfully so, I guess. And it takes up a lot of attention in most single people's mind, in the bandwidth of your attention. But online dating is just one way of dating. It's not everything. We'll be talking more about that shortly. Lastly, they say here second to lastly, they say here 40% of online relationships end through email or texting is how they end. And when it comes down to it, 64% of people who use online dating are looking for someone they have something in common with. And 50% of people say they are looking for someone with physical characteristics they're attracted to. So what we put the most weight on is how people look and their interests. But as I'll be talking about more here, what we think we want in a partner is often not actually what we want. We put so much emphasis on the specs of the, in quotes, product that we see, that we often lose touch altogether with the human experience of, two human beings with hearts and desires and love and fears come together, that gets pushed so much to the background. And I want to say also that there is a lot of cool stuff about online dating. Like today, it's made so much easier to actually find people to date and go try stuff with and hook up with in your area. You can, as if you've done any online dating, you can specify a radius from where you are and actually meet people. You can look through hundreds and hundreds of people, which in the old days, or if without the benefit of online dating, would have taken you years and years and years to look at that many potential partners. Also, you can actually meet, and you can meet your soulmate from anywhere in the world, someone you might never have physically come in touch with when there was no such thing as online dating. And one of the things I'll be quoting a little bit from another fun book that I totally rate. If you have an interest in looking into the intricacies and also the science and statistics of dating today, a fun book to read is book called Modern Romance, written by the comedian, actually. A little unusual maybe, but it's a really great book. It's written by a comedian named Aziz Ansari. It's very insightful and has a ton of cool statistics and history and insights about different dating and how we date differently in different cultures. You know, how we do it here in America is not the same way it's done in Japan or Argentina, which are some of the countries he makes comparison studies with. But he has a fun piece of study in there that says that 100 years ago, where we tended to meet our partners was in the same village we lived in or in the same apartment building. And as time progresses, the radius inside of which we meet our partners increases and increases and increases, so that now it's global. We could meet our partner from anywhere in the world. And, you know, I don't know if you know this, but Sonica and I, who host this together, we're a great example of that, because I'm a Danish person. I now live in the States, but I grew up in Denmark. I lived the majority of my life there. Sonica is from California. She's lived her entire life in California, and yet here we are. We met, and we are married and running a great life together. So we're a good example of meeting someone who, we might not have met. And I should say also, we did not actually meet through online dating, but in person. More about that later. You are listening to the Dare to Love podcast with your hosts, Sonica Tinker and Christian Peterson, founders of LoveWorks. And another thing that is really beneficial about online dating is for people who might feel a little shy and hesitant about putting themselves out there, getting in the dating game, getting started maybe if you haven't been in it for a long time. Maybe you've been married and your marriage dissolved or your spouse died perhaps, so that now you find yourself a single person and you might be having some fears and trepidations about getting out there. Online dating has actually been a really great help in that way, because it makes it easy to kind of stick your toe in the water. You can have a lot of very initial relationships online. So many people will also tell us that they have the vast majority of their initial relations happen online. So it's by texting or messaging inside the dating app or emailing. And you can get to kind of stick your toe in the water and get started a little bit. And you can decide, from there, it's easy to decide, well, hey, let's just meet for a half an hour for a cup of coffee somewhere, or take a walk around the lake or whatever. So it's been a great help to get started if you're a little rusty or shy about that. So that is another really cool thing about online dating. Now, let's talk about some of the challenges and issues that, that single people report to us that cause both, just frustration, but also some serious heartache. One is kind of like my friend was saying, it's like a full-time job doing online dating. It's like profile fatigue. You can look through hundreds and hundreds of profiles and pictures, with whatever app you're using, whether you're swiping or scrolling on your desktop or, however you use it. You can look through a huge number of faces and profiles. And after a while, it gets really tiring. It's like, they start to blend together and it's hard to make out any differences. They might all look pretty attractive, but as soon as you click into anyone, you're like, oh no, definitely not that person. And you get tired. There's actually, I heard one of my friends was talking about he was calling it decision fatigue. This is a coach friend of mine who works with businesses, and he said it's a common thing both in business and our personal lives that we have decision fatigue, or another way to say that is indecision overwhelm. Like, it's easy to be given the vast array of choices. It's really easy to get overwhelmed completely to the point of you don't really feel anything, and you can't really feel your heart and your gut anymore, and it's like your intuition is playing tricks on you, and they all look kind of good, and you end up deciding nothing because it's so hard to choose. And you might have heard about this. It's pretty common these days to talk about this, the phenomenon that we have in our modern world, where we live in a culture where we have an unparalleled number of choices. We have historically unheard of level of freedom and options. And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about buying a coffee maker, a car, get a job, or find our soulmate and a spouse. A famous book that was published, I think in 2004 by Barry Schwartz, talks about the paradox of choice. Why? It's called The Paradox of Choice, Why More is Less. And he talks about how they do studies about, the numbers of items that are available to us in a supermarket. And of course, you'll know this as a modern consumer. You go to any supermarket, it doesn't matter what you want. Jam, as one of his examples talk about, or peanut butter, or laundry detergent, or milk, or meat, or fruits, whatever. There are hundreds and hundreds of options for any one item. And the studies show that we think it should provide us with more satisfaction because now we have an option to get everything specified to just how we like it. But the reality is that it makes us less satisfied. As a matter of fact, it makes us less satisfied. Even when we choose an item, we are less satisfied with the item we chose. I heard a great TED Talk, and unfortunately, I forgot who the speaker was. If it was Barry Schwartz or someone else talking about this phenomenon, the speaker was saying that he was going in now to buy a pair of jeans. This is not a fashion conscious man. He's a man in his 60s. He doesn't really care that much about how his jeans look. The last time he bought a pair of jeans was 15 years ago, and he just got a pair of Levi's 501, and that was fine. Now he walked into a store and he wanted a pair of jeans, and the clerk asks him, okay, well, would you like them skinny or shapely or bell-bottomed or stretchy, and she keeps on going through. There are literally hundreds of options. And after he tries 20 different pairs of jeans, he walks out of the store and he said, I probably got the best fitting pair of jeans I've ever had. They fit me so well. And he said, I wasn't really happy with it because I couldn't stop thinking about, well, couldn't it have been customized a little better? There were so many other ones that were also nice that now I don't even know. So point being is that it's really hard to choose, and that the number of profiles and people that we can scroll through is both wonderful because there's so much choice, but it also makes it really challenging to choose, and it makes it really challenging to not constantly doubt whether you couldn't have picked something better. So that no matter who you're in front of on a date, it's hard not to think, wow, couldn't he have been more successful, more happy, more open, more spiritually advanced? Or couldn't she be more, so on and so forth? In order to describe this way we date now, I came up with the term dating Amazon.com style. Actually, that's the title of the podcast here today. Dating Amazon.com style. Because, when you go on Amazon and you shop, you sort for the things you want. And it's all about the specs, the product details, the price, and you can filter what you like. You quickly, in seconds, when you look for any given product, you scroll through the pictures of it, the product specifications, and maybe a couple of reviews, and you move on or you pick it. That's kind of how we do dating, as if it were a product. And some of the statistics from eHarmony that I just mentioned, like for example, that we lie about our age, our height and weight, and our income, we do that in order to make the product of me look more appetizing and appealing, so that hopefully more potential, in quotes, buyers will want my product. And I want to read you. It's just one page from Aziz Ansari's Modern Romance that talks about this. And the headline here is, "Most people stink at online dating." So here, this is quoting from Aziz Ansari. "Online dating is like a second job, just like my friend said, that requires knowledge and skills very few of us have. In fact, most of us have no clue what we're doing. One reason is that people don't always know what they're looking for in a soulmate, unlike when they're picking something easier like laundry detergent. While we may think we know what we want, we're often wrong. According to Dan Slater's History of Online Dating, Love in the Time of Algorithms, the first online dating services tried to find matches for clients based almost exclusively on what clients said they wanted. The clients would usually fill out a survey indicating certain traits they were looking for in a partner. For example, if a man said he was looking for a tall, blonde woman with no kids and a college degree, the company showed him everyone who fit this description. But pretty soon, online dating companies realized that this wasn't working. In 2008, Match.com hired Armina Thombra as its new chief of algorithms. Thombra set about figuring out why a lot of couples that Match.com's algorithms said were a perfect fit often didn't make it past the first date. When he began digging into the data, he discovered something surprising. The kind of partner people said they were looking for didn't match up with the kind of partner they were actually interested in. He discovered this by simply analyzing the discrepancy between the characteristics people said they wanted in a romantic partner, like age, religion, hair color, and so forth, and the characteristics of the people whom they actually contacted on the dating site. We began to see how frequently people break their own rules. When you watch their browsing habits, their actual behavior on the site, you see them go way outside of what they say they want. Stop the quote here. Now, Sonica and I in our workshops, we have been teaching for many, many years that what we think we want is not what we really want. And this is true about what we say about our married partners, and this is true about what we think we want in a dating partner or in a potential soulmate. Most of us have a list in our mind. We have a list of specs that we think we want. So if I'm someone who is into spiritual growth, organic food, community service, I'm a passionate Democrat and I love going to the movies and I love baseball, then I'm very apt to think, I really want to meet someone who is open to spiritual growth, who is also a Democrat and who lives in my area, by the way, and who, is into organic food and is also a vegetarian if I'm a vegetarian. So we have these must-haves on our list. Our list is typically, it's a list of desires and also must-haves, like must love sports, must love dogs, must be under 50, must be open to spiritual growth, must be of a certain religion like me, must make $90,000 a year or more, must so on and so forth. And this list of specs that we have, some of us have written it down. I've met people come to me, who can whip out their phone and show me the notes with 50 different specs on their list. And some of us just run it in our minds. And you can be sure you have one, because it's not a bad thing per se that we have a list. It gets created automatically by our previous relationship experiences. So, if I've been in relationships that were, if I was in a relationship with someone who was yelling and screaming at me all the time and criticizing me, and it's automatically gets added to my list for the future relationships that I want someone who talks to me nicely, who is respectful and kind in their communication. If I was with someone where it was always a big frustration that we never had money to repair our roofs because he or she wasn't working or didn't want to or was lazy, then it automatically gets added to my list that I want someone who is hardworking, responsible, and has a decent income. So in that way, it's automatic. Where the problem arises is that we get very attached, wedded to these must-haves on our list. So now when I go online dating and I look through profiles, I look at the picture. The picture is pretty much the only determinant for whether I click into it. Actually, in Aziz Ansari's book here, he quotes I can't remember who, for saying that 90% of the action that takes place on online dating sites is determined by photos, not by the text that's on there. In any case, the photo has a giant impact on whether I click into the profile. When I click into the profile, I run whatever I see there, I run it through my own list of specs, or my own list of must-haves. It's like this database search that runs in my mind. Your mind can process hundreds of these every minute, probably every second. And I go, I run through my internal list and I'm like, nope, 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 nope. Because hardly anybody fits all of my specs. And another pitfall or misunderstanding that often happens for single people out in who are doing dating is that I think what I'm wanting to find is a ready-made, fully fledged, ready to go husband or wife or soulmate or partner, however you think of that person. So that in my mind, I have a picture of what the perfect person looks like, according to all my specs. And that's like the finished product. So I expect that the person I see on the internet site or on my phone or on the first coffee date is going to be that person right there and then. But that is almost never the case. Sure, there are lots of experiences, and some of us have had them, where you meet someone and right there and then you say, wow, you're it. We were just hanging out with a couple we know who've been married for 30 years. And she said, the first time I met my husband, I walked up to him, I looked him in the eyes, and I said to myself, I am going to be married to this man. We are going to make a life together. And that is a wonderful story. As a matter of fact, it gives me goosebumps and it makes my heart sing to hear it because it's just so sweet. And I'm a sucker for romance and love, no doubt about it. But that's not how it most often happens. Like even Sonika and I, who, when we met, there was definitely instant attraction and interest. And wow, I'm catching something in this woman's eyes that I really am, I have an impulse to get closer to it. But there was by no means instant relationship or instant marriage. As a matter of fact, our story is an interesting one because you can read that in Aziz Ansari says the exact same thing about his current partner, by the way. But Sonika and I are a great example. When I had started this relationship with Sonika, I was in my first half of my 30s. If I had used an online app, I would have searched at that time for someone who was, say, in their 30s or late 20s, has a college degree, lives in the vicinity of Copenhagen. I lived in Denmark at the time. Let's just say I used only those 3 criteria. Well, Sonika would never have shown up. Like she would have never shown up, not on the age, not on the vicinity, not on the business she was in. At that time, I thought I was doing something totally different in my career. So I would have never looked for spiritual growth, for example, or personal development. Now, obviously, that's hugely important to me, but it wasn't when I started. So we would have, no algorithm in the world would have paired Sonika and I up, because our specs are so different. For example, Sonika is 15 years older than me. When we met, Sonika had 2 young children, and I did not have any children. I was looking for, who I thought I wanted was someone who was, around my age, who did not have any kids, so that we could have kids together and build a life together. I wouldn't even have looked at people who had kids, but Sonika had 2 kids. I am now very happily the stepfather, I'm just known as dad, to our wonderful children. But it was so not what I was looking for at the time. Other examples, Sonika already was, a financially responsible, successful, and established in business kind of person. She had had a long business career at that time. She had 401ks and savings and owned rentals and whatnot. I, on the other hand, was just started. I'd had a major transformation in my life. So I had said goodbye to what I thought was going to be my career path. I just walked away and was basically starting from zero in life. I didn't have any job. I didn't have any steady income. I didn't have savings. I had no money. The only money that was attached to my name was a sizable student loan debt. So if from Sonika's point of view, she had looked at me through the lens of, does he fulfill these specs? I wouldn't have fulfilled any of them. I was too young, too poor, too irresponsible, too unsettled. It would have never been a fit. And this is just a great example of how what we think we want is not what we necessarily want. through this list of specs and must-have, we turn people into two-dimensional beings instead of these 3, 4, or 5-dimensional beings that we are in reality. And when we expect to meet a ready-made, perfect person on the first shot or the second or the third shot, we are bound to be disappointed, because that is not who is going to show up on your dates. Who is showing up on your dates is not a ready-made person. It's a human being who may, over time, develop into someone you would really love to hang out with. Because how relationships get built is over time and through shared experience and through openness and sharing intimacy and fun stuff and hard stuff, and by going through challenges. And that is not happening on the first date or the second date or the third date. Furthermore, because we're so worried about showing up as a good product, we tend to, just like we do on our profile, lie about our age or weight or income. You are listening to the Dare to Love podcast with your hosts, Sonica Tinker and Christian Peterson, founders of LoveWorks. We do the same thing when we show up on the first date. We might not blatantly lie about stuff, although some people for sure do. But we're so in the mode of, in the attitude or the mode of judging a package, both the one that's sitting across from me, but I'm also aware that I too am being judged severely by the other person, that the whole setup is this judge fest where we both get to run the other person through our list of specs, and that's it. We'll often have people tell us, and sure, I'm not saying that there's never any truth to that, but it also eliminates a ton of people who could be amazing relationships for you. So we'll have people tell us, just give me 3 minutes and I'll know if she's interesting to me. But you can imagine, like, how do you like being on the receiving end of that attitude? How do you like it if somebody says to you, hey, let's just meet for 3 minutes for a cup of coffee, I'll know if you're interesting? You know, most of us wouldn't like that one bit. As a matter of fact, I have an annoying feeling in my gut just saying it as a pretend example here. Sonica did a really interesting phone call for a group of singles in our mastery program the other day, and she was asking them questions about, why would you choose not to start a relationship with someone who has children? Or someone who does not want children, could be another one. Why would you choose to not start a relationship with someone who is have a very different age from you? Why would you choose to not start a relationship with someone who has a health issue? And all the single people on the call, they had good reasons for why they wouldn't do that. You know, they wouldn't want to be saddled with the responsibility of taking care of someone with a health issue, for example. They wouldn't want to hook up with someone who was 15 years older, like Sonica and me, because, I don't want that person to get too old before me, and so we can't do fun things, and so on and so forth. But then when she flipped the question around and said, how do you feel when potential partners or suitors tell you, oh, well, I'm not starting a relationship with you because you're 15 years older, or you're 15 years younger, or I'm not starting a relationship with you because you have arthritis, or because you have a bad back, or because you have diabetes. And everybody, when it gets turned on me like that, I'm like, man, I don't like that. I personally, Christian talking here, I have arthritis. Okay, great. If someone were to tell me I don't want to be in a relationship because you have that, I mean, I would accept that, of course, and it definitely wouldn't feel very good. So you got to remember that all this judging and spec sorting that you're doing is being done to you as well. So to sum all that up, we tend to go dating Amazon.com style, like we purchase and look for products on Amazon.com or any other site. And we treat ourselves as well as this product that should be and we treat ourselves like a product too, whose And we treat ourselves like a product too, so that I got to make myself look shiny and bright and attractive, even if I have to fiddle a little with it. When we do meet, whether it's on the phone or on email or in person, there is so much judging and assessing going on that it's almost impossible for any genuine relationship to thrive, given that real relationships and the kind of relationship you want, assuming that you want a relationship that is full of honesty and where you can be yourself and where you can share both the good and the bad, and where you can talk to each other, where you can have fun, where you can love and connect and be both soft and strong. Assuming you want that, well, most of the dating setups are anathema. Is that the right word? Is like the opposite environment of what you would want to create for such a relationship to thrive, or to even have a shot at getting to a point where it would thrive. So, what are some of the things we can do instead? I said I'd get to that point too. So, in the last bit of the podcast here today, I want to talk about what can we do instead. First, I want you to remember that online dating is just one, and not even the most important necessarily, way to meet people. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, there was no such thing as online dating. And back then, people still met each other. They still dated. They still got married and made families with wonderful people. All those options are still available. Granted, not as many people hang out in libraries anymore, but they hang out at other places. And it's still the case that the vast majority of relationships start by being introduced by friends, by meeting friends of friends. That is still, I think it was the last statistic I read here in researching for this podcast, was 68% of committed relationships or marriages that start still happen by friends meeting friends or friends of friends. So it's through personal connections. The other thing you can do is seek out people who you think will have a similar interest or real desire as you. And I'm not just talking about, if you like baseball, go look for people who like baseball, although that could be a way to start. If you're someone, and we know people have done this in our workshops, if you're someone who really want a relationship that is deep and intimate and honest and expansive, and where you use your challenges to grow, like you want that kind of authentic, intimate relationship, go to places where such people go. People have come to our workshops for that reason. And the couples that have been created where single people have met each other in our workshops, they have gotten to see how the other person shares, how they talk, how they move, how they deal with challenges, how they deal with wonderful things, how they deal with their other relationships. So they get to feel each other out that way. You can do the same. Like find meetup groups where people are into spiritual growth, or hiking for that matter, if that's the thing, and start there. It doesn't have to be an online dating thing. As a matter of fact, if you don't like online dating, don't feel pressured to do it, because there are so many other ways that relationships happen and people meet. Next, I would recommend to you that you ditch your list. Or if that's a little too freaky for you, at the very least, loosen your grip on your list. Like, don't be quite so quick to write someone off just because you find out they don't love dogs, or they have a kid, or they've been married before and divorced, or they live outside your 25-mile radius where you're looking for people, or because they're of a different nationality, or because they're of a different age. Don't be quite so quick. Instead, pay a little more, slow it down a little, and pay attention to how you feel. I read a quote from Dr. Helen Fisher, she's a relationship expert. She's actually an anthropologist by background, and she was one of the first experts that got hired by Match.com to help them develop personality assessments and questionnaires that would help people hook up. So she definitely counts as an expert. Even she said there is no better way. I believe she said there's no other way to really know if you want to be with someone than to go meet them in person. Because Our feelings and our brains can do things that no algorithm will ever do. And when you meet people person to person and you actually get to know them a little bit, you have a much better shot at making a real decision about, hey, is this someone who could be interesting? There's another fun book that's circulating in many singles circles now that's called The 4-Man Plan. I can't remember the author's name, but it's a really fun book. You just look up The 4-Man Plan, where the woman based on her own experience is recommending, she's talking to women in this case, that they always date 4 men. Because you can never know you can never know the fullness of a person in one date, or I'd say in even 2 or 3 or 4. There is so much to a human being that doesn't get to show up on that first time when we're all in presentation and look flashy mode. So pay attention to how you feel. Look people in the eyes and get a sense of who they are. Create more meaningful connections when you do meet people. Sonic and I at our workshops, we start sometimes our workshops. We start with an exercise we learned from Rich and Yvonne over at the Challenge Day organization called If You Really Knew Me. If you really knew, and you simply share, if you really knew me, you would know this about me. And you share both the good and the bad and how you really feel. And we do this in settings where people agree to it, but you could do it in a lighthearted fashion. You don't have to make a workshop out of it. You could do it and just say, hey, I heard about this fun game someone played. It was called If You Really Knew Me. Want to try it? We just do a couple of minutes each. I'll start. And then you start. If your partner agrees to that, you just start and say, hey, if you really knew me, you'd know I'm really nervous right now. If you really knew me, you'd know it's really on my mind that my dad just died, and it's kind of hard to get it out of my head, and sometimes I sit at home and cry when I think about him. If you really knew me, you'd know I'm really excited to meet you. Or, whatever is on your mind, but be real about it. Of course, to the extent you feel safe and comfortable doing that. And I'd say you can also stretch yourself beyond the point where you feel comfortable. And when I say pay attention to your feelings, if you are someone who says, and I'm saying this because other people have told us this, is like, I get in trouble when I just listen to how I feel, because, when I see a guy, first thing I want to do is just jump in bed with him. And, it's gotten me in trouble in the past, how much I just, want to go have sex. I use this example because I used to be like that. All my relationships started with, let's just have sex fast. So, and that often did not work out for me in the end. So I set up like a policy for myself. So this is a great way. If you are such a person, you can set up policies or structures or rules for yourself. So I set up a policy that was, I don't have sex with anybody the first month. Cool. And some of the dates I had were shocked by that because they'd never met a guy who would say, let's not have sex right away. But it really worked for me because it allowed me to get to know this person past or beyond what was just merely sexual attraction. I can be sexually attracted to someone and have, be all hot and bothered, but that does not necessarily mean that it's someone I want to be in a relationship with, even though I might enjoy having sex with them. So I set up a policy like that for myself. And the last thing I'll recommend that you do is that you take the time pressure off the entire dating process. We know, from talking to hundreds and hundreds of singles, we know that many have a terrible time pressure, either because the biological clock is ticking or because you simply think that, the older I get, the less attractive I get, then my options are going to be shrinking, or because you just can't wait anymore and you're so longing to have someone, to meet someone to share life with. All that time pressure, whether it has a good reason or not, it makes you all weird, just to say it bluntly. And it creates stress and anxiety, and it prevents you from actually feeling into what a person feels like and how you feel with this person. Because when there's this time pressure, we are even more prone to just running through the list and typically discarding people in saying, I don't have time for, I can't waste any more time. If you might relate to that yourself, or definitely you've heard single people, your friends say this. I can't waste any more time on this. I don't have time. I'm in my 40s or in my 50s. I don't have time to waste on another relationship. So I would recommend you take off the time pressure and you say to yourself, I am going to find a great partner. I'm going to get what I want. This is one of my beliefs in life. I'm going to get what I want one way or the other. I will literally do this with myself. So I'll say, it's okay if it doesn't happen tomorrow. It's okay if it doesn't happen next month, because I have faith and I trust that I will get what I want one way or the other. So it's okay. I'm just going to go enjoy the process. And in the process, consider all your dates as nothing but practice. It's just practice for the next relationship. So it gives you permission to show up as the very best version of you. And if you need help, that's totally fine. You talk to people like Sonica or myself or someone else you trust who has expertise in this area. You come to our workshop or someone else's training, or, put yourself in environments or with mentors you trust who can help you out with this, because there are a lot of details to this. Like Ashish Ansari says, most of us kind of stink at doing this because it's a complicated matter meeting another person. So just consider it practice. Take the pressure off yourself and show up as honestly and authentically and vulnerably and funny as you are, as you can be. And don't be so quick to write people off just because they don't match your spec list. So that is all I'll say for now. I'll round it off. There's much more to be said about this, but I think this will suffice for today. I hope this was useful to you. Dating Amazon.com style. Maybe try to do a little bit more of dating with your heart style the best you can. If you want more information or we can help you out in any other way, don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you so much for joining. I personally totally believe that you can and will find the love you desire, because you're an awesome person and there is no lack of other awesome people that you can hook up with and relate with and build something wonderful with. So take heart. There's lots of hope. Thanks so much for hanging out with me here today, and we'll see you next time. You have been listening to the Dare to Love podcast with Sonica Tinker and Christian Peterson, co-founders of LoveWorks. And hey, if you found this podcast to be valuable, would you hit the share button and go ahead and share this with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, or wherever your favorite hangouts are. Thanks so much for sharing the love.